Hello, welcome to the Wildline podcast. I'm your host, Dan. This is a podcast about movies and how much money they make at the box office. This is the weekend review show. We're going to talk about this weekend that is just ending now, December 9th through the 11th. What we'll do is we'll walk through the top 10. I'll make some comments on each film, and maybe we'll do a little bit of deep dives to sort of the big stories of the weekend. Coming at number 1 this weekend was Moana, the Disney animation film, with $18.9 million. Really good drop on this, only 33%. It's typical with like children's films that are high quality. Their drops tend to be lower, in the low 40s, 30s. So Moana's doing well. Its total gross so far at the end of 3 weeks, or I guess 3 weekends to be specific, is $145 million, which is, I think is okay. I don't know. I have a hard time reading this film because when this film came out over Thanksgiving, it basically just popped off. And a lot of people were like, oh man, like it's only like a few million behind Frozen. Like where's this going to go? Is it going to be like Frozen and just stick around for months and then just make a ton of money? I don't think that's actually the trajectory of this film, unfortunately. I think it popped off right in the beginning during Thanksgiving. But now it seems to be... It's not that it's struggling. It's just not the sort of firecracker that Frozen was. And so it's probably going to end up, it's at 145 now. I'm thinking it'll probably end up at, I don't know, somewhere hopefully over 200. I doubt that it would ever go, it would end below that. I'm not really good with like the later weekends sort of projecting total outcomes for films. I'm good with like the early weekends, but once you get to the 6th, 7th, 8th weekend, I'm like, I don't know what's going on. So I don't know where it's going to end up. I think that I think Disney's going to be happy with the performance, but it's just not a home run, I think is the bottom. It's more like a standing double for Moana. Success, it's going to make a profit, but just not an overwhelming stellar performance by that film. But who knows? It could, who knows with next weekend with Rogue One? Who knows what's going to happen? Nobody knows. It's going to be a total shit show, to be honest with you. Just like The Force Awakens last year. Like, no one has any idea what Rogue One's going to do. Like, I know that the theaters are going to shove every single possible theater that they own is going to be playing Rogue One. I mean, that's just the way it is. It's smart business. So I don't know if Moana is going to drop by like a normal 40% next week or like 50 or 55% next week. My guess is that it will stick around for a while, but it won't do much north of 200 as its final total. So a pretty good performance from Moana. Still number 1, that counts. Number 2 is Office Christmas Party. This is the only wide release opener of the weekend, and it did okay. It did 17.5 million is the current estimate. Now again, I'm doing the show Sunday night. The estimates come in, I believe, midday Sunday. So they are really close guesses. It's not the actual. The actual will come out Monday afternoon. But the studios release these. They're not gonna, unless they have a reason to smudge a number. They're not going to do that. And so 99% of the time, these are pretty much on the money. So Office Christmas Party did 17.5 million. We talked at length about my projection of this film last week. It came in definitely below what I thought it was going to do. So its per theater average was about $5,500 per theater. I had guessed this was going to do about $22.4 million with a $7,000 per theater average. So we talked about some comparables last week about how this would perform. And this is a super hard time period and weekend to judge. One, because Office Christmas Party is the first true wide release opener from a major studio in the last 2 weeks. So it had a wide open schedule to really hit a home run here, and it did not. When this movie first I saw on paper or whatever, with the actors and the director and all that kind of stuff and just the concept, I was like, wow. Like, and there's nothing opening on this weekend. I was like, it's got to do like 30 something million, right? It's got to do like at least mid to high 20s. Really successful would be like mid 30s. That's what I was thinking for this film. And I think that's what Paramount was thinking too, with all the marketing money they dumped into this thing. But it did not perform to that level at all. But when you take a look at the comparables, it's not necessarily a terrible performance. Sisters opened last year. That was a rated R comedy. Opened to $13 million. But that was the same weekend as The Force Awakens. It ended up doing like a insane multiplier. I think it was like maybe over 4 or 5x. So, Office Christmas Party beat Sisters, but I don't think it's going to beat it in the long run. I think Sisters will have a better legs, just because of a better movie. I mean, the critical reaction to Office Party was terrible. It's hard though, because, with rated R comedies, it's like critics tend to not like them as much. But the audience reaction right now on Rotten Tomatoes is bad. The cinema score is B as well. So the quality is quite suspect here. Office Christmas Party opened right in line with one of my comparables, Internship. That's the Vince Vaughn, Owen Wilson film about them having an internship at Google. That opened at $17 million at about a 5,000 per theater average. That was a few years ago now. I would say 2013, and it was a summer release too. So Office Christmas Party hit that pretty much exactly. The good news here is that it didn't perform as poorly as Night Before Christmas. It's just called The Night Before. Duh. The Seth Rogen movie, hard rated R comedy that came out last year before The Force Awakens. So that was like a dead on comparable with this. That opened at $9.8 million and only about a $3,400 per theater average. So it doubled that per theater average of Night Before. So I think, it's kind of a mixed bag with this. It clearly did not match the bigger comedies of this year so far, like Bad Moms. I thought it might... if this film did pop off, I thought it would have acted like Bad Moms in terms of its opening. Bad Moms opened up at about $23 million. And then also another big comedy this year that I thought it could be in the realm of possibility was Sausage Party, which opened at $34 million over the summer, which was a big surprise to a lot of people, with $11,000 per theater average, which is great. Almost as good as Boo! A Medea Halloween. So I think the bottom line with Office Christmas Party is not a huge flop, but it's probably going to end up being a loss for Paramount. They've plugged in $45 million into this movie. The marketing budget alone in the United States and Canada had to be over $50 million. I mean, this movie was everywhere. Jennifer Aniston and TJ Miller were on every TV show possible. It just was not, for some reason, the response to this film was just not hype. It just wasn't. And when the trailers first dropped, I was like, okay, this looks all right. Like, it doesn't look as good as I thought it was going to be. And then I noticed it very specifically about a month ago, when there should have been some real buzz about this film. There was none. And I just think it's a marketing problem. The cast was there, the director was there, the concept I think is great. Who doesn't hate their Office Christmas Party and want it to be kind of a like total shit show like it should be? Nothing clicked. It's weird. The concept clicked with the cast and the director. All that stuff felt like in line, but the actual final product and the marketing was not there. So it doesn't really surprise me that it underperformed my projections at 17.5 million. But I think Paramount's not going to be very happy with that. Also because this film's going nowhere. Like Rogue One opens next week. This thing's going to get cut off at the knees here real soon. I was really psyched to actually go see it. I don't know if I'm going to see it now, just because it just seems pretty lame. In any event, Office Christmas Party was in number 2. Number 3 is Fantastic Beasts and Where to Find Them. A nice 40% drop on this last weekend. Its fourth weekend. It's still dropping screens now at 362 down this weekend. Per theater average is about 3,000. It's just about to hit $200 million. And I think this reminds me a lot of Moana's performance. It's a decent performance. I think it's good. It will lead to a profit to the studio. This is not a break-even film. This is a profitable film. And I walked through what I thought the profitability was a couple weeks ago. I can't remember what I came to the conclusion of, but I basically said that it's probably not going to be $100 million profit. It's probably going to be below that. And that's not a bad thing. It's just not a home run. Moana's not a home run. Office Christmas Party was like a ground out to third base. I think Fantastic Beasts is more like a double, just like Moana. Decent performance. It's going to make a profit, but the ROI here may not be that great. And I say that only to compare these three films with number 4 this weekend, which was Arrival, which had a phenomenal 22% drop and made $5.6 million this weekend. And it's its 5th weekend. It's made $81 million so far, which I think is quite beyond what I thought this film was going to do. And I think what the studio thought it was going to do. This is I think in their wildest projections, they're like, maybe we'll hit like $50 million. So it only dropped 22% this weekend. It's adding screens. I can't even possibly think of a film that was released wide, is like an adult movie that's sort of like a little sci-fi, a little drama, but definitely aimed at the over 25 audience, that in its 5th weekend is adding 200 screens. Like, that doesn't make any sense to me. It's kind of crazy. So it's doing quite well. It's a home run. Like, Arrival, for what it was, is a home run. Compared to Fantastic Beasts, which is great, Office Christmas Party, not really a flop, but it's probably going to end up being a loss. And Moana, which is doing well. Arrival is just a shot right out of the park. I mean, just fantastic overall. The ROI on it's going to be great. I'm sure they threw a ton of money into marketing, but its production budget was only $47 million. Hell, compare that to Office Christmas Party, which is going to end at like $50 million. Arrival's going to end at like maybe even 100 if it keeps going like this. So doubling up Office Christmas Party on its final run. So fantastic performance for Arrival. Coming at number 5 was Doctor Strange, 4.6 million. Great drop of 30%. It's starting to lose some screens. Lost about 170 screens this weekend. Per theater average is really healthy for its 6-week weekend at $1,700. Its total take so far is $222 million. I can't, I'm talking like home runs versus doubles and stuff like that. Like, what is Doctor Strange? I don't know. Like, it's Marvel, so you expect them to do well. It's a brand new character in their cinematic universe, so there was a little bit of like a bet going on here and a risk. It's not just another Iron Man film that's going to make $300 million and not blink an eye. But I think its performance overall is really, really good. And especially for a newer character, like if you look at Ant-Man, which came out last summer of 2015, that ended at about almost exactly $180 million from what I remember. And this is shooting way past that. I think I remember when this movie, the trailer came out for this, and I was like, not from like an artistic perspective, I'm not a huge fan of Marvel movies, just sort of as my confession. I don't really like a lot of comic book movies. I could probably talk at length about that, but I'm not going to. But from a business perspective, when I saw this get announced and I saw the first trailer and the early cut footage, I was basically like, this doesn't feel right to me. It feels kind of off. Benedict Cumberbatch in that role, Tilda Swinton. I was like, I don't know, this feels kind of boring to me. But as the visuals started to get updated and new trailers released, I was like, oh wow, this looks fantastic. And at the end of the day, this is the Marvel machine, essentially. And it's not just marketing. It's like the craftsmanship of these films is like highest tier possible for a blockbuster. So even if the story's not great or the acting's not great, it just looks beautiful. And people, not that I'm saying that about Doctor Strange, people seem to really like that film. The point I'm trying to get across is Marvel does not put out bad products. No matter what the input is, the output is always fantastic. And I think Doctor Strange really proves that Marvel, as of right now, can really do no wrong. And, I think Doctor Strange will probably end in the mid-2000s somewhere. Sorry, mid-200s, maybe 250, something like that. In any event, awesome performance from Doctor Strange with a great drop. Coming at number 6 was Allied with $4 million. Decent 43% drop. Its per theater is pretty bad, though. It's down to $1,300 per theater. Average total take so far is about $37 million. I'm sorry, $35.6 million. This is a flop. This is a total flop. The budget's way too high on this. $85 million budget. You got to pay for Robert Zemeckis and Brad Pitt. This should have opened much higher. The take should be, who knows what that's what I don't understand is like, what was the thought process with this film? Why would you give this film $85 million? Zemeckis can't bring in the cash sometimes he didn't with The Walk last year. So I guess this was filmed before. I'm just being sort of nitpicky. I just don't understand why Paramount would throw $85 million at this project. It makes no sense. And I talked about it at length in another podcast. The thing is, like, it started out really poorly. It's picked up its performance recently in the last couple of weeks. But it's going to end way below what it needs to make money. This is a loss. This is going to be a loss for Paramount. And it's Robert Zemeckis' second strike in a row. And it would be funny to see if he has another big movie out in the next couple of years and he strikes out with 3 duds in a row like Ron Howard did this year with Inferno. So we'll see where it goes. It's kind of not a great performance by Aled. In number 7, Nocturnal Animals. This is the Focus feature Tom Ford directed thriller, I guess you would call it. I don't know. I don't know if it's really a thriller. I know that the new commercials make it look like a mid-90s sex thriller. And I was like, that's not really what the movie's about, is it? Because all the other trailers make it seem like Tom Ford's last movie, A Single Man, which is like a super arty, really sort of cerebral film. I don't know what's going on with this movie, and I don't know what's going on with Focus Features, because they put this out as a wide release film. It added about 1,100 theaters this weekend. It took in, I said it was going to flop. This is a flop. I mean, it came in at $3.1 million. Its per theater average was $2,500. So, its total take so far is $6.2 million. I just can't figure out what is going through their head of why you would do a wide release on Nocturnal Animals. Like, it's so obviously an art film. A Single Man, the first Tom Ford movie, which is one of my favorite movies of all time. I think it's an absolute masterpiece. That never made it to more than 300 screens. And that took, I think, like 4 months for it to reach 300 screens. It opened up in like December and ran all the way through like April or May. It was like a typical old school limited release sort of plan for that film. And I can't figure out why Focus Features did something totally different with Nocturnal Animals. It was a limited release for a few weeks, like 3 weekends. And now they just tossed it on, 1,200 screens without like ever making the sell to middle America that this is a film they want to see. Like sure, people in Los Angeles, New York are going to see this movie. Like, there's no doubt. Like, they're just going to go see it. Like, it's one of the arty films that they go see. Are people in San Antonio and Omaha and Milwaukee, where I grew up, like, are they going to go see this movie? No, they're not. They're clearly not. And like the per theater average of 2,500, that's down from 5,000 last weekend when it was a lot smaller. Now, it's not a total disaster, but everybody thought this movie was going to do, at least 4 million, at least 5 million on a wide release like this. So it's pretty poor performance overall by Nocturnal Animals, and I think a really big business mistake by Focus Features. And what this movie has now is this sort of aura of failure to it. Like, I just don't get. I guess there's a couple of reasons why they might have done this. One, they want awards buzz for the film. Tom Ford for Best Director, Jake Gyllenhaal for Best Actor, and Amy Adams for Best Actress. She probably is the best shot of all 3 of those to get a nomination for this film. So maybe it was a award push. I also think there was a sort of like a power vacuum the last 2 weekends. It's almost like, when there's a tsunami and the water on the beach pulls out into the ocean and everything like dries up before the big wave hits. That's sort of what would happen the last 2 weekends at the box office. The Rogue One tsunami is coming next weekend. And so there's just been this sort of like, no studio wanted to release a film in the last couple of weeks. And it's just, everybody's been sort of like conservative and quiet about things. Office Christmas Party, which is like a boring genre film, of course, was the only thing that really come out. So I get the feeling that smaller studios felt like there was an opportunity to push some limited art films out to mass audiences and maybe trying to get some buzz and word of mouth, or maybe try to get some award noms. That's the only way I can think about that this makes sense to Focus Features. Other than that, it just seems like a really dumb move. I will say that Nocturnal Animals does seem like a high quality film. The marketing team, like I mentioned earlier, did make an attempt through TV spots to sort of make the film seem less like urban centric for art film crowds and more just like, oh, this is a really interesting thriller movie that you want to see. It reminded me a lot of the stuff, type of films that would come out. This is like in the mid 90s, like Dimension films, like movies like Body Heat or Sleeping with the Enemy, where it was like, there's this like sort of subtle hint of sexuality with everything, but it's also kind of noir, but it also seems kind of trashy kind of at the same time. I think that need has been fulfilled by Lifetime movies over the last 15 years. But you haven't seen a ton of those come out major releases. And I saw a TV spot for Nocturnal Animals about a week ago, and I was like, wait. Is that the same movie that I'm thinking of? Because when you watch the actual trailer, and if you know Tom Ford, there's nothing trashy about his films. Like, they're just gorgeous and they're beautiful. And they're just full of just wonderful colors and images and light. They really are art movies. Like, that's what they're meant to be. And so it was kind of sad to see Focus Features like kind of get in the gutter and like try and play off Nocturnal Animals like some cheap thriller from 1996. And it didn't work, you know, and I think it's going to disappear really quickly once Rogue One comes out and takes up all the theater space next weekend. Kind of a different story, another limited release going wide or sort of semi-wide is Manchester by the Sea, which came in at number 8 this weekend with $3.2 million, about 3.1, 3.2. It expanded about 200 screens this weekend. And its per theater average was about $8,600. So it's taken in about $8.3 million so far. I think the story on Manchester by the Sea, it kind of runs as a foil to Nocturnal Animals. Amazon bought the Manchester by the Sea. This is the, I believe, Matt Damon produced, starring Casey Affleck and Michelle Williams. They took a very different approach to this release, and I found it very fascinating, and it's very unlike what you normally see for a limited release like this. Normally, what you're going to see is they put it out in the big cities, see if it does really damn well. Per theater averages over 100,000 and tons of buzz. Everyone wants to see it, tons of sold out shows. And then they try and like push it out to wider audiences, either gradually or suddenly. I feel like suddenly doesn't work very well. The big example that I see of that is Steve Jobs, which had a $130,000 per theater average on its opening weekends in New York and Los Angeles, and then collapsed the moment they pushed it out past 1,000 screens. So the counter to that is let it run limited for a super long time. Try and slowly but surely add different cities. Get it out to Phoenix, get it out to Miami, get out to like Dallas, and see if it connects with those audiences, and then slowly ramp up the release schedule. And then at some point, and I think Moonlight did that as a really good example of how to do it well, and that's from A24. They pushed it out over 500 screens, and it kept having a good per theater average. So it's just sort of testing the waters. Unlike Nocturnal Animals, and later I'm going to talk about Miss Sloan, where they just dump it and then it like falls apart. That you gotta be able to, especially for smaller films, you have to be able to build word of mouth on these. And Manchester by the Sea has been doing a great job of that. The TV ads that have been on for the last month are really kind of strange. It's almost like an infomercial from Matt Damon. Matt Damon's on your screen like look like he's gonna sell you like the new food dehydrator or something. But he's like, hey, like I made this film, or I helped produce this film. I think it's amazing. I think you guys should see it. And you're like, why? What? Why is he telling me to see this movie? But it seems like it might actually be working, because it gives a film that may have been lost in the shuffle credibility from somebody that we all know. We all know Matt Damon. We all like him as an actor to some degree. And when he comes on and says, hey, like you guys should see this movie, it kind of actually works. And with that per theater average on about 400 screens now, it's still above the 5,000 per theater average. It's almost at $9,000 per theater on 400 screens. That's good. My guess is they're going to keep it at this level. They're not going to push it out super wide past 1,000, or even like 2,000 or something like that. They're going to keep it at this level, keep that word of mouth going, make sure it keeps performing well as you expand. And then before you know it, if it sticks around for the next month and some, the awards start coming out, right? Well, the awards will be coming out this month in all the way through. Well, the awards basically will come out until the end of the year. There'll be a little bit of a gap, and then the Oscar noms come out. I think what they're trying to do is keep Manchester by the Sea on a low simmer until the Oscars come out, because I can guarantee you that it's going to get nominated for Best Picture, and it's going to get nominated for Best Actor for Casey Affleck. So I think that's probably their strategy. Now with Nocturnal Animals, it'll be gone within 2 to 3 weeks. So like people are going to forget about it. They're not going to forget about Manchester by the Sea, because people will keep seeing it in the theater, and that sort of word of mouth of how good it is will start trickling out to different cities, so that people in Omaha know what it is. I keep on using Omaha. What about like Denver or something? I think it's going to work. I think Manchester, I think that release strategy is really going to work. It's the old school way of doing it, and I think it's a proven method of getting people to go out and see a more artistic film that doesn't necessarily have a lot of hype or buzz behind it. It gets people in the seats, and that's the difference between a limited movie that makes $10 million and a movie that ends up making 50, or even the sky's the limit if you really connect with your audience. So Manchester by the Sea still doing well in semi-limited release. Trolls coming at number 9, $3.1 million. Decent drop, down 33%. Total so far is $145 million. I get the feeling that this thing is really running out of steam. Its per theater average is almost below 1,000. So I think it's going to be disappearing pretty quickly. Also disappearing probably quickly. I'm not really sure, because it's like an adult film. Hacksaw Ridge only dropped about 31%, came in at $2.3 million for the weekend. Lost 200 screens. Per theater average is $1,000. It's getting to that point where it's sort of made all the money it's going to make. It's probably going to end up at like 65, maybe $70 million at the end of the day. So really good performance for Hacksaw Ridge. You know, I've talked about this film 1,000 times. Mel Gibson's back. That's the end story on that one. And there may be a Best Picture nom, and maybe Best Director, and maybe even Best Actor for Andrew Garfield on that Hacksaw Ridge. So that's the top 10. A couple movies I also wanted to talk about outside the top 10. And I talked about this one last week, and this has been sort of the theme of this episode is limited movies trying to go wide, I think, is when I take a step back and think about it. Miss Sloan came in at number 11. This was a limited release kind of art film from Europa Corp. They're kind of they've been around for a while over in France, but I think they're newer to releasing films in the US. Miss Sloan is kind of like an intellectual film about intellectual film. What the hell does that mean? It's an adult drama is what it is, with starring Jessica Chastain as I guess a gun control lobbyist, kind of like a political thriller, I guess you could call it. For some reason, and I ranted on this last week, just like I just ranted this week on Nocturnal Animals, for some reason I thought it'd be a great idea to push this film out wide. And Nocturnal Animals didn't work out, and this was even worse. And I was right about this one. I love being right. That's why I do this stuff. Well, at least half the reason why I do this stuff. I said in last week's show that Miss Sloan, despite the projections saying it would do $2.5 to $5 million is what Deadline said, I said it was just going to collapse, absolutely collapse when it went wide. Now, I want to remind you that its per theater average the last 2 weekends was $11,000 per theater last weekend and $19,000 the weekend before. That was its opening weekend in the sort of New York, Los Angeles areas. I was like, this is gonna flop. I said sub 2 million. It came in at $1.9 million. So I was pretty darn close with that. The overall story with Miss Sloan is it was just a business mistake. You know, this company's sort of new to releasing films in the United States. Maybe they saw the vacuum with Rogue One coming out and nothing really new coming out the last 2 weekends. Maybe they wanted to just sort of see what kind of money they could make. Whatever their strategy was, it just did not work. Miss Sloan only made $1.9 million. Its per theater average was $1,100. I mean, this is just a disaster. It's its third weekend. It's only made $2 million so far. This is going nowhere. If I was a theater owner, I'd be so pissed if I decided to have this film open, because I think they might have to play it for at least a couple of weeks. It's a huge flop. It was just a terrible decision to release it wide. I don't know. It kind of seemed like an HBO, maybe Netflix streaming premiere. It just didn't even seem like a great art film to be releasing. But it is what it is. It was a failure. This is another example of how not to release a limited movie as a wide movie. It wasn't doing that well on the limited circuit anyways. So it's kind of just like, why don't you just let it sit there for a while and let it make some money and then push it out to VOD right away and get people to see the movie that way. It feels kind of like the sunk loss fallacy, where it's like, oh, we got to make our money back, so let's push this thing wide, and it just falls flat on its face. Kind of proving my point in the whole process. So Miss Sloan definitely failed on its wide release or wide expansion. Other movies sort of in the play now. Almost Christmas is at $40 million. That's great for that film. I didn't think it was going to go that high, but it's done pretty well and stuck around. That'll probably play through the new year in at least a few hundred screens. Bad Santa 2, huge flop. It's only at $16.8 million now in its third weekend. It's funny, like I'm noticing these flops, and they're coming from smaller distribution companies and studios. Bad Santa 2 came from Broad Green Pictures. They are a pretty small group who's only put out 13 films overall. Their best film was Walk in the Woods, which came out September 2015. That was the Nick Nolte, Robert Redford film. That was supposed to be pretty good. Their second best film was Bad Santa 2, which is a huge flop. So they're small and new, and maybe they're just getting their sea legs. I don't really know what their story is. But the reason I'm bringing it up is because High Top Releasing has also put out a couple of flops this year. The Darkness, Incarnate is the most recent one and came out last weekend. They're just these, and Miss Sloan too, newer company, maybe just trying to figure out like what works and what doesn't work in these markets, but they're not doing well. And you compare that to like A24 and Bleecker Street, who are smaller startups in the film distribution and film production world, and I think they're both really, really doing well. So maybe they'll figure it out, and maybe they'll go out of business. Who knows? Incarnate was number 14 with only about $1 million. Per theater average was $632. Not as bad as Bad Santa's per theater average of $600. So those will both be basically eliminated all next week when Rogue One comes out. The only other big story I wanted to talk about was La La Land. So La La Land is the Ryan Gosling, Emma Stone musical. When you say musical, it's like my skin crawls. Not that I'm like totally against musicals in general. It just sometimes they get kind of annoying. And maybe it's a thing I grew up with. You had to watch musicals in high school. I was like, ugh, terrible. And like I've seen West Side Story way too many times, and every time I see it, I'm like, oh, it's kind of like interesting. And the thing with musicals to me is I love music. I'm a huge music nerd. But for some reason when I'm watching a film, it's like I don't want the plot to hinge on a pop song every 5 minutes. It just like it's really jarring to me for some reason. In any event, but I am really stoked for La La Land. The director is the guy from Whiplash. That was his big debut movie that came out in 2014. Did incredibly well across the board, won a ton of awards. So this is his follow-up, and there is so much hype on this film. Like the hype on this has just been off the charts since the Toronto Film Festival. And I really think it could break out huge, absolutely huge. And I think that its performance this weekend in just New York and Los Angeles, I think, is the only two cities it was released in. It's on 5 theaters. Gets you to take notice. It had a per theater average of $171,000 per theater. And actually have not looked this up to try and figure out where it is in the all-time list. But it is probably going to be pretty high. Let me see where it's at. It is now top 10 all time. So La La Land had the top 10 per theater average ever this last weekend with $171,000. Other movies that had high ones like that, or Grand Budapest Hotel with $202,000. $100,000 per theater. It bodes quite well for La La Land, and I think that it's going to get a lot of awards contention. It's already got added to a few lists, like AFI put it as one of its top 10 films of the year. The real question I have here with La La Land is this going to play like Grand Budapest Hotel and take in $59 million total, which was a great result for Wes Anderson and his film. His films usually don't do insanely well. They usually do pretty well. He has tons of cultural cachet because every single hipster in the world loves Wes Anderson. I love Wes Anderson, and I gush about him all the time to other film nerds, but outside that world, he's not, necessarily that well known. But with Grand Budapest, he sort of crossed over into sort of a little more mainstream success. Is La La going to go that route, or is it going to go the route of something like The Master? The Master opened on 5 screens on its opening weekend, did about $150K per theater, only ended up at $16 million total. So that's the really question with La La Land. Is it going to break out? There's definitely arguments to say that it won't. You got to remember that if it's opening $170,000 in Los Angeles, I know for a fact that most of that money comes from ArcLight, which is a theater in LA. And I don't know how many shows they had of this film, but I looked at the website on Friday and it was just like show after show after show. So my point being is that ArcLight in Los Angeles is usually like a very specific little bubble. And if they love it there, that doesn't necessarily translate out to any other city. Now, especially because the movie's about Los Angeles too, and it has a very romantic view of the city. So I think, obviously the people living there are going to go see it and be like, there's an interest there that's just built in. Is that interest going to be there for somebody in Tampa? Probably not. So the question is, what is it going to do? I can see it both ways. My feeling is it's going to break out. And the reason I say that is it has a very old classic Hollywood style to it. Less so like, remember when The Artist came out and won Best Picture? That was kind of weird, wasn't it? It was a good movie. It wasn't bad. It just wasn't, off the charts great. It felt like a weird movie to give Best Picture to in whatever it was, 2012 or something. So La La Land shares that sort of very classic Hollywood style. But the thing about it too is the stars. Emma Stone and Ryan Gosling are two, I think, of the most beloved younger actors in the business, especially Ryan Gosling. Like, he's been in so many different movies that like I could see it definitely plays like more a female centric film, but I could see girlfriends or wives or whoever getting their significant other or partner to go with them because Ryan Gosling's in it. He was in Drive. He's just like a cool guy. Everybody really likes him. He was in Place Beyond the Pines, which was awesome. So it's got some dude cred in it as well. And Emma Stone is just lovely. She's fantastic. She has only gotten, she's been around for a while. She's pretty young, but she got her start pretty early, and she's just grown into a wonderful actress. I mean, really just fantastic. And I'm hoping that this film will catapult Gosling and Emma Stone into that sort of, not the top list A-listers of Hollywood, but sort of the top tier of, actors in terms of their creative ability. I hope Ryan Gosling can get up to that level of sharing it with somebody like Philip Seymour Hoffman or, like I'm thinking like Tom Wilkinson, like that real pedigree of acting where it is just this highly respected art form. And I think Emma Stone can get there too. It's like her and Amy Adams. I was not sold on Amy Adams for a long time. She was fantastic in Junebug, which I saw a long time ago. That was her first big role, I think. But she's really, especially with Arrival, she's really upped her game significantly, where I think she is sort of getting to that top tier when we were speaking of just the art of acting, that top tier level of actress. And I think Emma Stone might get catapulted into that realm as well with La La Land. So I'm really bullish on the movie. I think that it's going to blow people away, and I think that it's going to play quite well outside the big cities. And I think it's going to get a lot of awards. It's definitely going to get a Best Picture nom. I would bet my life that it gets a Best Picture nom. Now it's like 12 movies now. How much money is it going to make at the end of the day? I have no idea, to be honest with you. It could make $20 million. It could make $100 million. I don't know. But I do feel this buzz about it that makes me think that it's going to go really high, like over $15 million. But, it could fall flat on its face. It could just be a weird LA hipster New York movie, and no one wants, like The Master, and no one really wants to see it outside of those places and outside of those subcultures, essentially. Only time will tell. So I'm excited to see what it does next weekend versus Rogue One. And that's mostly it for the weekend. I'll be back middle of the week to talk about the elephant in the room, which is Rogue One, which starts playing Thursday night. I have no idea what it's gonna do. Like, I honestly don't know. People are all over the place with it. Like, I know projections were coming out even earlier this month. We're like, oh, it's gonna be like 150. The Force Awakens did $240 something million. Like, what 150 doesn't make a ton of sense to me, but at the same time, it's like not part of the Star Wars storyline, the main storylines. Is that going to matter to people, or is this going to be seen as a Star Wars movie, and they're going to see it with the same sort of excitement and hype behind it? I have no idea. So I'm going to think about it a little bit more, and then we'll do a show middle of the week with projections for Rogue One. I think is Passengers opening too. I got to check right now. No, just Collateral Beauty, which I don't even want to talk about, but I'm going to talk about it anyways because it is a wide release from Warner Brothers. So you got Collateral Beauty and Rogue One coming up this weekend, and then Why Him? No idea what the hell that is, coming out the day before Christmas Eve. Oh, and then Passengers, Sing, and Assassin's Creed all come out on Wednesday the 21st to do the Christmas release. So in any event, thanks for listening. I'll be back later this week to do my Rogue One show. Have a good one. This has been the Wildline Podcast.